South of Moose Jaw, there is, or there was, an abandoned water tower atop a small elevation, which gave a commanding view of the surrounding area, including the distant waters of the semi-mystical Old Wives Lake. It was a great spot to look over the surrounding prairie. It was also a great spot to hang out, smoke, and drink cheap beer, which is what they were doing one night last summer. It was Sierra. Of course it was Sierra who brought it up. We should try summoning Bison Head. What makes you think it would want to hang out with us, Joey said, being, as usual, a smartass. I don't believe in that stuff, Dwayne announced. But then, he didn't believe in anything. How do you do it? Lorna wanted to know. She was game to try anything. Yeah, anything. They all turned and looked at Willis, the nerd they let hang out with them. If anyone would know, it would be Willis. Summoning Bison Head is pretty simple, supposedly, Willis said in a faltering voice. He hated being the center of attention. All you have to do is say his name 3 times while thinking of a herd of bison. Can you think of like a great steaming pile of buffalo shit? Dwayne bawled. He didn't like Willis and liked to embarrass him. I'm only telling you what I heard, Willis said defensively. He noticed the rest of them laughing, so he pretended to laugh too. Let's try it, Sierra said. She was really liking the idea. You do it, Wilbur, Dwayne ordered. It's, Willis? Yeah, whatever. So, Willis did it. What choice did he have? Bison Head, Bison Head, Bison Head! And as he chanted the name, Willis wished that Bison Head would really come. That just might shut Dwayne up for once in his life. Who, or what, is Bison Head? Back during the days of the great bison, or buffalo herds, a hunter and fur trapper named Vasher roamed the bald prairie. One summer, Vasher fell in with a small group of nomadic First Nations people who were hunting bison. They would locate a herd grazing atop a plateau or elevated spot, then stampede the animals towards the nearest cliff, frightening them into running over the edge. The hunters would then descend and butcher the remains for both food and hides. The First Nations people were primarily interested in bison as a food source, but Vasher was more interested in the hides. They fetched a good price at Fort Garry or down in Minnesota. So Vasher wanted them to kill ever larger numbers of bison, but the others refused. And then there was the woman. History doesn't record her name, but it records that Vasher wanted her for his woman. Her role in the hunt was to don a costume of wolfskins in order to disguise herself as a voracious she-wolf and frighten the bison into stampeding. Vasher would stare at her across the campfire at night. Stare and brood. It came to a head one day when the woman, clad in her wolfskin, was driving the bison towards a nearby cliff. And then suddenly, and without warning, Vasher shot the other First Nations hunters, all 3, out of the saddle. Then he went for the woman. She had turned her head at the first shot and had witnessed the murders. Then she saw Vasher riding towards her. So she turned and ran, ran faster than she had ever run before, and jumped off the cliff, head first. The woman had escaped him in death, but Vasher was an expert at skinning bison for their hides, and so he made himself a belt from her skin, something to remember her by, a keepsake, but also a symbol of evil, which attracted evil. One night, a few weeks later, Vasher was sitting alone by his campfire when he noticed that everything had gone quiet, too quiet. He couldn't even hear the sound of the night wind, and he felt something or someone was watching him. Looking up, he saw the woman he had driven to her death. "What do you want?" Vasher snarled. And when she didn't answer, he told her to bugger off. She took a step towards him, and Vasher noticed the 3 men behind her, the men he had murdered. But Vasher remained calm. "Ghosts don't frighten me," he said quietly. And as he watched, the woman's figure began to shimmer and blur, her skin to darken and become covered with clumps of dark gray fur, her arms becoming elongated, hands becoming claws, her face twisting into a snout, her ears becoming pointed, her eyes turning into 2 orbs of reddish hellfire, and her mouth filling with rows of sharp white teeth. The she-wolf opened her mouth and howled, while Vasher now saw the 3 hunters had the shaggy heads of bison which walked on 2 feet. Vasher's horse had run off in terror, and he had no time to draw his revolver or reach for his rifle before the she-wolf and the bison men charged him, forcing him to retreat, then into a panicked run across the darkened prairie. He didn't know the cliff was there. Until he found himself falling through space. No one knows if Vasher's remains were skinned or eaten, but ever since then, 150 years ago, Vasher has roamed the benighted prairie, a humanoid figure with the body of a man and the enormous, shaggy head of a bison. Willis was still daydreaming about Bison Head when he heard a sharp intake of breath, then Lorna saying, "Who's that?" A man was walking up the road leading to the top of the elevation, a broad, stocky man with a long, dark beard and a full head of shaggy hair. "Hey, are you Bison Head?" asked Sierra, who was the prettier of the 2 girls. The stranger didn't answer, but stared at her, and then grabbed her by the arm, pulling her towards him. "Hey, you!" Dwayne bellowed, walking aggressively towards the stranger. The man released Sierra's arm and took a step back, then began pawing the ground with his cowboy boots. Dwayne laughed as he put his arm around Sierra. "What's the matter, dude? You got to go to the bathroom?" But he had no sooner spoken when the stranger lowered his head and charged. He moved incredibly fast and butted Dwayne's chest with the top of his shaggy head, knocking Dwayne off his feet and through the air until he slammed into the side of the water tower and lay still. Joey ran for the pickup truck, thinking of grabbing a crowbar, but the stranger barreled into him, knocking him off his feet and into the nearby ravine. The man moved back and, once again, pawing his feet on the asphalt, suddenly charged, head down, crashing into the side of the pickup and pushing it into the ravine and on top of Joey. Lorna tried climbing the ladder at the side of the water tower, but Bison had charged, for it was Bison Head. Bison Head charged, smashing into one of the supporting pillars and knocking it awry. The structure stayed motionless for several seconds and then collapsed as Lorna screamed and screamed again. But Bison Head was already leaving, hauling Sierra, kicking and screaming, into the darkness. Willis was running down the highway, running towards Moose Jaw. He heard noises behind him, and casting a frightened glance over his shoulder, he saw, running after him, the she-wolf, the bison men, and an entire thundering herd of buffalo. They ran or glided with supernatural speed, and Willis knew he couldn't possibly outrun them. So he threw himself into the ditch, screaming, "Bison Head! Bison Head! Bison Head!" over and over. And he was still screaming when they found him. The next day, 2 cops surveyed the damage. 3 dead, 1 missing, 1 in the psych ward. "What's this Bison Head that kid keeps screaming about?" Some kind of monster or something. You summon it if you say its name 3 times. The first cop began to chant, "Bison Head, Bison Head," and then stopped. "Why'd you stop?" the second cop asked. "I don't know," the first cop admitted. "Something told me not to. Some gut instinct. It's like in those old horror movies, eh? You know, there are some things man is not meant to know." Indeed. Indeed. But here's something you are meant to know. If this is your first visit to my channel, my name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring cryptids such as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. And now, Bison Head. I hope you will consider subscribing. Till midnight. Cheers.